Hashtag the Ellen interview, a Hollywood moment of truth. The studio lights blazed overhead as Leonardo DiCaprio adjusted his navy blazer and settled into the familiar powder blue chair across from Ellen DeGeneres. The audience's energy was palpable, their excited murmurs creating a gentle hum that filled the spacious television studio. This was supposed to be a routine promotional appearance for his latest environmental documentary, The Last Frontier, but Leo had a nagging feeling that Ellen had other plans. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the one and only Leonardo DiCaprio. Ellen's voice boomed across the studio as the audience erupted in applause. Leo flashed his trademark smile and waved, though something in Ellen's mischievous grin made him slightly uneasy. Leo, Ellen began, settling back in her chair with that familiar gleam in her eye that regular viewers knew meant trouble. Always such a pleasure to have you here. And might I say, you're looking particularly dashing today. Almost like you're ready for a hot date with someone who could be your daughter's age. The audience chuckled, and Leo's smile faltered slightly. He'd expected this, of course. The tabloids had been relentless about his dating life, particularly his preference for younger women. But he had hoped that Ellen, known for her generally respectful interviews, might focus on his work instead. Ellen, he said with forced lightness, I'm here to talk about The Last Frontier and the critical environmental issues we're facing. This documentary took 3 years to complete, and I think your viewers would be interested in. Oh, absolutely, Ellen interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. We'll get to all that serious stuff in a minute. But first, I have to ask, and the audience is dying to know, how do you keep track of all these 25-year-olds? Do you have like a special calendar app or something? The audience laughed louder this time, and Leo felt his jaw tighten. He glanced toward the producers standing off camera, hoping for some intervention, but they seemed content to let Ellen continue her line of questioning. I think there's a misconception about, Leo began. Oh, come on. Ellen leaned forward conspiratorially. We're all friends here. Tell us your secret. Is it the yacht? The private jets? Or do you just have really good pickup lines about climate change? Hey baby, want to see my carbon footprint? The audience was in stitches now, but Leo noticed that not everyone was laughing. Some people in the front rows looked uncomfortable, and he could see a few audience members exchanging concerned glances. His publicist, Maria, was standing near the cameras looking increasingly agitated, making subtle hand gestures that Leo interpreted as, wrap this up. Leo took a deep breath, trying to maintain his composure. He could feel the heat of the studio lights beating down on him, and for a moment, he thought about all the other interviews he'd sat through over the years, the countless times he'd politely deflected similar questions, the way he'd learned to smile and laugh along even when the jokes stung. But today felt different. Maybe it was the 3 years he'd spent in remote locations filming this documentary, witnessing firsthand the devastating effects of climate change. Maybe it was the conversations he'd had with indigenous communities whose entire way of life was disappearing. Or maybe he was just tired of being treated like a punchline instead of someone trying to make a difference. Ellen, I understand that personal life generates interest, but I've been working with leading climate scientists for over a decade. This documentary features interviews with Nobel Prize winners, and we've documented species that may be extinct within the next 5 years. I'd really appreciate the opportunity to discuss that. He noticed a young woman in the front row, she couldn't have been more than 22, watching him intently. She wasn't laughing at Ellen's jokes. Instead, she seemed genuinely interested in what he had to say about the documentary. It reminded him why he'd agreed to do this interview in the first place. Right, the environment, Ellen nodded with exaggerated seriousness. Speaking of the environment, have you considered the environmental impact of all those private jet trips to visit your girlfriends? I mean, that's got to leave quite the carbon footprint. Maybe you should date someone local for once, someone who lives within driving distance. Or better yet, someone old enough to drive herself. The audience exploded with laughter again, but Leo's patience was wearing dangerously thin. He forced himself to speak calmly, though his knuckles were white as he gripped the armrests of his chair. Ellen, can we please talk about the documentary? We filmed in 7 countries over 3 years. We documented the last remaining populations of several species that... Oh my God, 7 countries. Ellen interrupted, slapping her knee theatrically. Let me guess, you had a girlfriend in each one? That's quite the international romance tour you've got going there, Leo. Leo's jaw clenched visibly. That's not what this is about. We're talking about mass extinction, about coral reefs dying, about... Coral reefs? Ellen's eyes lit up mischievously. Is that what you call them now? I bet the 25-year-olds love your marine biology lessons. Several audience members stopped laughing, sensing the growing tension. Leo's publicist was now frantically gesturing from the sidelines, but Ellen seemed oblivious to the changing atmosphere. You know what, Ellen? Leo said, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. I've sat through a lot of interviews over the years. I've laughed along with jokes I didn't find funny, I've played the game. But this? This is different. Ellen, perhaps sensing she'd pushed too far, tried to backtrack. Leo, I'm just having fun with you. The audience loves. The audience deserves better, Leo cut her off. They deserve to hear about real issues, not tabloid gossip disguised as entertainment. Ellen's smile became more strained, but she wasn't ready to give up her routine. Oh come on, Leo, lighten up. We're all friends here. Tell you what, I'll make you a deal. For every environmental fact you share, I get to ask one question about your love life. Fair trade? That's not how this works, Ellen, Leo replied, his voice gaining an edge. This isn't a game show. We're talking about the future of the planet. The future of the planet, sure, Ellen said with a dismissive wave. But let's be honest, your audience is here because they want to know about Leonardo DiCaprio the man, not Leonardo DiCaprio the activist. They want to know who you're taking on that yacht next week. The audience cheered, but Leo noticed more people looking uncomfortable now. He could see his publicist Maria making increasingly frantic gestures, and even some of Ellen's producers looked concerned. You want to know about the man? Leo leaned forward, his blue eyes intense. The man spent 6 months in the Arctic documenting ice sheet collapse. The man has seen entire villages that will be underwater in 10 years. The man has held the last known specimen of a species in his hands, Ellen. That's who I am. Ellen laughed nervously. Wow, that's pretty heavy, Leo. But seriously, speaking of holding things in your hands, when was the last time you held hands with someone over 30? A few audience members actually groaned at this point, and someone in the back shouted, "Come on, Ellen." But she pressed forward, seemingly unable to stop herself. I mean, do you have a special training program for these girls? Dating Leonardo 101, how to pretend you care about polar bears. That was it. Leo felt the last thread of his patience snap. He could see the young woman in the front row shaking her head in disapproval, and several other audience members had stopped applauding entirely. Even Ellen's longtime fans looked uncomfortable with the relentless personal attacks disguised as humor. The audience exploded with laughter and applause, but Leo felt something snap inside him. He'd endured years of jokes about his personal life, had learned to deflect them with humor or simply ignore them. But this felt different. This felt cruel and reductive, turning his life's work into a punchline about his romantic relationships. In his mind, he could hear the voices of the scientists he'd interviewed for the documentary, Dr. Sarah Chen, the marine biologist who had shown him the bleached coral reefs in Australia, her voice breaking as she explained how decades of research might be meaningless if current trends continued. Professor Miguel Santos from Brazil, who had walked him through sections of the Amazon that had been pristine rainforest just 5 years earlier, now reduced to barren wasteland. These people had trusted him with their stories, their life's work, their desperate pleas for action. And here he was, watching their message be buried under cheap jokes about his dating life. He thought about the Inuit elder in Greenland who had looked him in the eye and said, "When the ice is gone, we are gone. Tell the world." That man had never heard of Leonardo DiCaprio, the movie star. He only knew Leo as someone who might carry his people's story to places where it could make a difference. How could he explain to that elder that the platform he'd been given was being used for gossip instead of their urgent message? He looked out at the audience and saw the mixture of reactions, some still laughing, others looking uncomfortable, and a few who seemed to be waiting for his response with genuine interest. These were people who might actually care about the environmental message he was trying to share, but instead they were being fed gossip and cheap jokes. Leo's expression grew serious, and he leaned forward in his chair. The change in his demeanor was immediate and noticeable. The laughter in the studio began to die down as people sensed a shift in the atmosphere. "You know what, Ellen?" Leo's voice was quiet but carried clearly across the studio. "If you're only interested in gossip and tabloid jokes, maybe you should book Kanye next time. I came here to talk about a film that addresses one of the most pressing issues of our time, and about climate change that's literally reshaping our planet as we speak." Ellen's smile wavered for the first time since the interview began. "Oh, Leo, come on, we're just having fun." "Are we?" Leo stood up from his chair, his movement decisive and final. "Because I don't find it particularly fun to reduce 3 years of hard work and critical environmental research to jokes about my dating life. Your audience deserves better than that, and frankly, so do I." The studio fell completely silent. Ellen looked genuinely shocked, her usual quick wit apparently deserting her in this unprecedented moment. Leo began to remove his wireless microphone, his movements deliberate and calm. "Leo, please, sit back down," Ellen said, her voice losing its television-polished confidence. "We can talk about your documentary." "I didn't mean to." "You had 30 minutes to talk about this documentary," Leo replied, clipping the microphone back to his chair. "Instead, you chose to spend it making the same tired jokes that every late-night host has been making for the past decade." "I'm 50 years old, Ellen. I've won an Oscar, I've produced dozens of films, I've donated hundreds of millions of dollars to environmental causes, and I've worked with world leaders on climate policy. But apparently, none of that matters as much as who I'm dating." The audience was riveted now, the tension in the room palpable. Some people were filming with their phones, despite the strict no-recording policies. This was the kind of unscripted television moment that would be talked about for years. Leo walked toward the edge of the stage, then turned back to face Ellen and the audience. "You know what the real tragedy is? There are young people in this audience who might have been inspired to learn about conservation, about renewable energy, about the species we're losing every single day. Instead, they got to hear jokes about my personal life." Ellen tried one more time to salvage the situation. "Leo, I apologize if I crossed a line. Please, come back and let's talk about your film. I promise." "The time for promises was before the interview started," Leo said firmly. "When your producers reached out, I specifically requested that we focus on the environmental message. I was told that wouldn't be a problem." Clearly, someone wasn't telling the truth. With that, Leonardo DiCaprio walked off the Ellen DeGeneres show stage. The audience sat in stunned silence for a moment, processing what they had just witnessed. Then, slowly, one person began to clap. Then another. Within seconds, the entire studio audience was on their feet, applauding thunderously. Ellen sat alone on her stage, the empty chair across from her serving as a stark reminder of the interview that had gone completely off the rails. Her producers were frantically communicating through their headsets, trying to figure out how to fill the remaining 20 minutes of the show. But the audience kept applauding. They applauded for nearly 2 full minutes, some of them cheering and whistling. It was clear that Leo's message had resonated with them, that his dignity in the face of ridicule had struck a chord that Ellen's jokes never could have. As the news of the walkout spread through social media in real time, the reaction was swift and largely supportive of DiCaprio. Environmental groups praised his decision to prioritize substance over sensationalism. Young activists tweeted their appreciation for someone finally taking a stand against the trivialization of climate issues. The incident became a defining moment, not just for Leonardo DiCaprio's public image, but for the broader conversation about how the media covers celebrities who are trying to use their platform for social good. It sparked discussions about the responsibility of talk show hosts to their guests and their audiences, and whether entertainment value should always trump meaningful discourse. Ellen DeGeneres, for her part, issued a public apology the following day, acknowledging that she had lost sight of what was truly important during the interview. But the damage was done, and the incident marked the beginning of a broader reckoning about the culture of celebrity gossip and the missed opportunities for meaningful dialogue that it created. Leo never returned to The Ellen Show, but his documentary, The Last Frontier, went on to become one of the most watched environmental documentaries of all time, proving that sometimes, walking away from the spotlight is the best way to make sure your message is finally heard. Thank you for watching. I hope you all enjoy this video and learned a lesson. I would be grateful for your likes. Also don't forget to subscribe and comment on the video. See you soon.